Hi, my name is JohnYAY. I'm an aspiring oil painter, and in today's video, I'm going to attempt to learn how to paint landscapes. In the past, I've focused heavily on portrait and still life painting with honestly very little interest in landscapes, but considering it's one of the three big categories of painting and I have yet to try it, I should probably give it an attempt. And frankly, if I want to be a well-rounded artist, I should probably learn how to paint what's outside my window. But first things first, before I get started, I have to do some canvas prepping. It starts with a few layers of gesso, essentially a mixture of glue and white paint which dries fairly quickly and helps ensure your surface is smooth and flat. I usually apply a layer of gesso, let it dry, sand off any high edges created by the brush, and then repeat the process 2 or 3 more times. With the prep out of the way, it's time to start my first attempt. I set up my easel and oil paints near a beautiful wooded area and started to paint the view of the pond and the field in the distance. I began by using a dark green mixed with Gamsol to thin it out and allow it to dry faster. This mix makes it easy to establish the really large shapes in the scene, namely the horizon line, field, pond, and the foreground including the large trees, blocking in a general color for each shape. I'm not too focused on detail at this point, just trying to get a sense of the overall picture, and I believe this is called an ébauche, which is the first very basic color layer of a painting. I'm trying to work from big to small, which is something that I do with my portraits and still lifes, so I'm trying to apply that here. Remember, I don't really know what I'm doing at this point, I'm just trying to dip my toes in the water. Okay, it's about 8 o'clock, and I think the lighting was a little bit better earlier today, so I'm gonna wrap up and finish tomorrow morning. Alright, it's the next day, and the plan is to finish up the foreground and add some detail to the prominent trees on the left and right sides of the composition. I have to say, this landscape is giving me trouble. I'm used to creating detail in a very specific way for my still lifes and portraits, but with the detail overload that is a landscape, I have to find a way for my brush strokes to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Hopefully I'll pick up on these techniques as I continue to make more paintings, but unfortunately, Mother Nature had other plans and it started to rain pretty heavily about an hour and a half into my session and continued for the next couple days. Super quickly, while we wait for the rain to stop, I just want to quickly shout out MEEDEN. MEEDEN sent all the paint and art supplies that I'm using in this video, and they also hooked me up with an affiliate code, so it's not really a sponsor, but if you click the link below and use the code JohnYAY, you'll save 12% and I'll get a small commission. So shout out to MEEDEN for sending all the art supplies, and let's get back to the video. All right, it's been a couple days and I haven't been able to work on this painting because it's just been raining so much I can't get outside, but it's given me some time to think and I'm not a huge fan of the colors I'm using in this painting. I think it looks okay, but there's definitely not enough distribution of value. It's all sort of one value. And I think the colors are a little too vibrant. So I looked up a few tutorials or demos online, got a sense for what other people use in their landscape style paintings. And I mixed up a bunch of paints to match, so I'm really excited to get into this. I'm gonna start painting over this. I'm not sure if it's gonna work. It might totally ruin it, but I was gonna restart anyway, so I may as well just try and fix this one. If it doesn't work, I'll make another one. It's all about learning, so who cares anyway? Really quickly, I just wanna go over the paints that I've mixed here. So it all starts with the core paint out of the tube, which will be white, yellow, red, burnt umber, and ultramarine blue. I also have green and orange here. I mixed the orange with the yellow and the red, and I just put some green on here just in case, but I didn't use it for these mixes. And the mixes below, we have sort of a list of whites that lean more brown. We have a list of whites that lean more blue, and then I have sort of a brown to yellow and a dark green to sort of a light green or close to a yellow. So that's what I'm starting with. I'll mix more on the fly if I need it, but I think this is gonna get me most of the way. With my palette all ready to go and the sun out, at least for now, it's time to start painting over this landscape, trying to improve it while adding more detail. I only just got started and now it's raining again, so I'm gonna wait this out. Hopefully it's really short. Okay, I think we're all good now. Let's get back to it. Once again, with the rain out of the way, I can continue to work on this painting. Starting at the top with the furthest elements in the picture, also known as the background, but slowly working my way forward so that everything overlaps in a cohesive way. Finishing off with the trees and branches in the foreground, which I think I laid on a little bit too thick and clunky, but all things considered for a first painting, I don't think it's too bad. After a somewhat rough start to my landscape journey, I decided that a little inspiration was in order. I figured if I walk around with my camera, I could find some cool spots, but most importantly, collect a few reference photos. Not only that, but when I'm walking around generally, as crazy as this sounds, I like to observe the colors around me and try and mix them in my head as a way to practice. I'll look at a color and give it a label like low chroma, high value, yellow, and then move on to the next color. This feels like a great exercise for me to get familiar with the colors around me while I'm exploring, looking for a scene that excites. As you can see from some of these photos, there are actually a ton of good painting options around me. I would love to make a few of these paintings from these photos to get a better sense of what I like to paint when it comes to landscapes. And I think I'm going to start with this beautiful scene of the boathouse from across the lake. But before I jump right into this painting, I want to do some minor edits to this photo to make sure it looks a little bit more like the colors I saw in real life. Now that I have the photo looking the way I want, I can start working on this painting. For this second painting, I started with a basic sketch of the composition using burnt umber and Gamsol, similar to the way I started my first painting, but with only one color this time. Then I started tackling the clouds, which luckily look fantastic in the photo I took, so I'll try and replicate them as closely as I can. Once again, I have no technique for any of this, so it feels a little like moving around in the dark, hoping I head in the right direction while taking notes on what I like and don't like. Also, as you might be able to tell, I'm not in my normal painting space, so I was constantly battling glare off the wet paint, moving with each new painting, trying to find the ideal spot to work from. So my apologies if it's tough to see the painting I'm painting, but don't worry, it gets better. So I think I'm done with this painting now. I could keep pushing it a little bit further, but I'm just not having fun with it, and there's a lot of paint that's still wet on the canvas, and it's just turning a little bit muddy. So I think it's time to start something new. But let's talk a little bit about what I hate about this painting. Mainly the trees and the water. I like the composition a lot, but I just didn't do it justice. And I think that all comes down to the brush strokes. I need to learn how to make chaotic brush strokes that are abstract, but still make sense. There's certain shadows that trees will never produce. And I think that a few of them exist on this painting right here. So I'm gonna keep pushing. It's time for a new painting, so let's just move on. So after I made this painting, I actually made another one that's very similar, but I don't know what happened to the footage, or I just forgot to record it. So there it is. Honestly, I think it's kind of rough, and at this point I was not feeling good about my landscape painting abilities. Luckily, seemingly out of nowhere, I was struck with fresh inspiration. I went outside to see that the farmers were actively plowing and baling the field, and I knew immediately that that was what I wanted to paint. So I went and grabbed my camera and started to record and take as many photos of the act that I could. The more photos, the more opportunity to capture something that just has to be painted, and I ended up getting some amazing photos for reference, which is exactly the change in energy that I needed to bring me out of my slump. And after some quick edits, I immediately set up my easel and got to painting, but this time starting with a pencil drawing to see if that worked any better for me. I chose this photo, one with a prominent bale in the foreground, as it would allow me to create depth in the composition as well as some variance in detail. The clouds were non-existent in my photo, so this time I had to try and make them up myself. At this point, I was flying high, channeling my inner Monet, really trying to let the brushstrokes create the detail and life in this piece. Alright, it's the next day, and I thought I would be continuing working on this painting, but actually, the more I look at it, and especially from far away, I think it looks really good, and I don't want to push it too far into, overworking the painting, if you will. So instead, I'm just going to start a new painting. And a new painting I started. Basically the same composition as the last painting, but they are slightly different, so this time I went with a bit of a cooler palette, a little more overcast in contrast to the bright and sunny day that was my last painting. Alright, I've been working on this thing for about 2 hours, and I'm pretty happy that I didn't paint over the other one because this looks way different. The colors are way more muddy and gray. I'm not sure I hate it or like it or what I feel about it. It's not bad, but I think I'm going to take a break and start a new one in a little bit. At this point, I was ready to increase the difficulty and paint a more dynamic scene, one that shows the farmers in the act of baling all that loose hay. And because of the success I had starting with a pencil drawing on my last two paintings, that's how I started this one as well. Followed quickly by large areas of color to get a better sense of the overall composition, then beginning to add detail over top, working from the background to the foreground. Before I knew it, it was getting pretty late, so I closed up shop for the night. Okay, it's the next morning, and after taking a second to just sort of observe the painting as it is from far away and up close, I like where it's headed, but I just think I need to push the values a little darker, especially in this tree line here and within these sort of clumps of hay that are waiting to get baled. And then I need to make this little baling truck, a little bit more obvious. That and probably a bunch of other things, so let's just get painting. I spent the next couple hours continuing to add detail to the painting, looking specifically for areas that need more emphasis on value and darkening or lightening them respectively. Another painting in the books, and I'm really enjoying looking at this painting. I think it's the best one I've made so far, and although there are problems with it, I'll tell you what I like. First of all, I really like the depth that's created by these rows of unbaled hay moving towards the horizon line and then back towards the foreground, adding more detail as you get closer and closer. I love the clouds and the tree line and the little truck in the background, but most importantly, I love that this painting tells a story. I was super lucky to be at the field while they were baling. They only did it for one day and probably for 5 hours, so if I missed it, this painting would never exist. And it allowed me to capture not only a place, but a place in time. You know, they're still working on this task of baling, and you can tell that there's sort of clues that lead you to the solution of baling day. So this picture is in motion, it's dynamic, and tells a really cool story. And it's stuff like this that I want to include in more and more of my paintings. But with all that being said, I think I have one more painting left in me this summer, and I want to take all my gear out to the field and go paint some hay bales from life. So let's go do that. I was hoping all the hay bales would still be strewn across the field, but they've been packed into these organized little areas, so I think I'll find a way to paint this. Now that I'm a bit more comfortable with landscapes, it's time to increase the difficulty by heading out into the field and attempting to make a painting from life. Once again, starting with a quick pencil sketch, I find this extra important when working from life, as your composition has yet to be defined. When you paint from a photo, you already know where each object in the scene is compared to the outside edge, but when working from life, you need to establish that early before building the details. Also, as you can see in the previous shot, I simplified my palette, only using white, yellow, red, brown, and blue. No premixes, everything developed on the fly, which I think gives it a more natural look as you're constantly working with small variances in your color. All right, it's the next day and this painting's looking all right. Honestly, I think it's headed in the right direction, but if I spent another few hours on it, I could make it even better. So I think I'm gonna head out. It's a nice sunny day again today, and the bales of hay are in the same spot, so I may as well just continue working on this painting and see how it goes. I set up my easel for one final session and got to work. The sun still needed some time to move so that the shadows would align with what I painted yesterday, so I decided to start working on the trees in the background. From there, I created more separation in color between the bales and the grass and included the tracks, giving this painting more life. I finished up by darkening the shadows and adding a small amount of blue for the string that holds the bales together and added highlights to the top. All right, I think it's time to call it a day. And with that, that is the end of today's video. Before I go though, I do want to just sort of show all of the previous paintings from this video, put them up on the screen so you can just see them all and we kind of go over each one. I had a lot of fun learning the first one. Of course, I dove in the deep end and tried to paint I tried to paint from life, and it was reasonably successful, but not exactly what I wanted, and into the painting of the boathouse, which looked a little better, but I think the structure needed a lot of work and, just wasn't quite up to stuff. I painted another one, which you didn't see, which was across the pond at the sort of two barn structures. And that one honestly is even worse than the boathouse painting. And then the hay bales. So I love that first painting of the hay bale. I think the second one, the more I look at it, the more I dislike it. I just think I ended up muddying all my colors and it just didn't look right. And then into the hay baling painting, which I did from photo reference, and I think looks pretty cool, honestly, in my opinion still. All the way to the last painting I made, which was this one in the field of the row of hay. You can see it right here, sitting right beside it. And I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out, considering actually the longer I sit here, the more flies get stuck in the painting. So I should probably wrap this up, but thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you learned something, or at least enjoyed watching me struggle through some landscapes. And I hope to see you in the next video. I try to make one video a month, so expect that, and I'll see you in the next one.